Well, first, we're going to talk about alt text. Okay, so any image that you have needs alt text. It needs a descriptive text that conveys the meaning. So this is tricky because sometimes we put images for just purely decorative, right? And if that's the case, you can mark them as decorative. But if you've included an image in your content that is conveying meaning, then you need to give it an alt text. This allows the screen reader to tell the user what is what the image is for, what is it conveying. And Carlos points out in a lot of our other sessions that if you hover over an image that maybe hasn't loaded properly, right, on your screen, like you have a slow internet connection, if it has alt text, you as the user don't have to be using a screen reader to see. It gives you the image description. So then it can tell you. So if it didn't load, you can also see that as well. The alt text should be concise. It doesn't need to be a paragraph long. Okay, just 1 or 2 sentences to describe it. You would avoid using words like image of or table of because the screen reader will know that. So you don't have to start with that. You can save that wording. Okay. So this is, go ahead, Kevin.
What if it's something like in a PowerPoint, a screenshot of a table, so the screen reader might not know to say?
That's not a best practice. And so we would recommend not using a screen. And that's a great question because we do it a lot, right? We are all guilty. So let me say to you that I am just as guilty as you of making these mistakes, okay? And the more that we do this, go ahead, you're gonna show yours.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So in this case, for example, this is the image of the status report. So if we were to share this, it's inaccessible. Okay, because it has a bunch of content. So what we had to do is recreate it as a table.
Recreate.
So now that's accessible.
Because we weren't even gonna share the other image, right? Because yeah, exactly. So that's a great question. So and that's something that we definitely do. So in this image, we have an image of an apple. And so by using if we right click on that image, then you can select the button towards the bottom of that toolbar that says view alt text. And at that time, that's where you can, if you're creating this document from scratch, and you can add your alt text here. It does have an AI generated option that can give you some captioning information, but you just have to make sure that that's what you're trying to convey, right? Because sometimes it doesn't know what you know. I spoke earlier about if it's decorative, there's an option there for you to mark that it's decorative if it is. Please don't mark it decorative if it is conveying meaning, because then the user doesn't get the same experience, okay?
Complex images. So this kind of goes along the lines of those complicated tables. So we know that there's going to be fields that have very complex images. Okay, and complex images, as defined by WCAG, is images that have substantial information. So you wouldn't be able to make sense of that image without a rich description. So the user relies on the image to understand concept. I know that science, we have a lot of those processes that we have to be able to describe, okay? So the meaning cannot be conveyed in just 1 or 2 sentences, okay? So for those images, we do recommend what is called a long description. So the long description allows you to add more details, okay? It's a lot more flexible than that, just an alt text. So for complex images, we're looking at a 2-part alternative text. So for the first part, you would indicate the short description, identify the image, and where can the user find the longer description. So that's the very first part. So in that text box, for your first part, you would include where to find that long description. For the second part, this is where you can add the textual representation of the essential information. So what are you trying to say about the image? I had a user last week, we were looking at a PowerPoint slide, and if you already have information within that one slide, maybe you can grab information from that slide for your long description. So we're not trying to reinvent what we do. We're just trying to use what we have, and how can we use information? I know that sometimes for those processes, you already have text on your slides explaining what that is about. So maybe it's a matter of just copying that and adding that into a long description. So the long descriptions can be can be provided using 3 ways. You can add a separate document, you can add a separate section at the end of your document, or it can just be right underneath the image, okay? So here's an example. So for this one, it's a bar graph, and you can see that at the bottom it says "See example long description associated with this image." So if I were to click on this link, it would take me to where the long description is. And again, with that long description, there is no limit on characters of how much you can describe, how many details. It is open-ended, okay? And I'm gonna show you an example in the next one with this one. Is that why I did not write this? It was generated by Gemini. It did a pretty good job at describing what the image was about a heart. So for this purpose, I just included right underneath the image, okay? Alternatively, I could have added at the end of my document, but this is how I shared the long description.